Hello. Thank you all for joining us. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you.
Hmm.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us to discuss the potential funding of downtown services in your community. We appreciate all of you being here, and I'm Danielle Wood. I work for CivicMic and NBS. The city hired my firm to encourage engagement with property owners in the downtown area. So we are excited to have this meeting tonight to kind of pick up a new start to looking at the services in your community. And I wanted to just go over, this is our agenda here on the screen. We have what we'll be discussing tonight. I'll provide an introduction, and then we'll go over where we are now, what a PBID can do, the PBID process and background, what we've heard from property owners, and then open it up to questions and answers. We will be saving questions and answers until the end of the meeting. So we will ask that you all remain on mute. If you remove yourself from mute and you notice that we add you back on, that's because we want to keep the background noise down so everyone can hear the presentation. We do have a group of individuals who have met on site together in a community room and then everyone online. So we will give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have something that comes up, jot it down, save it for the end of the meeting, and then we'll go over how we'll do those questions, how we'll address those once we get to that portion of the meeting. If you haven't already visited civicmic.com, that's civicmic.com/Tulare, we encourage you to do so. We currently have a survey out to gather feedback and information from all of you. If you've already taken it and you have already visited the site, then we encourage you to share that with your neighbors. This meeting will be recorded and shared on the site tomorrow. And while we hope that all of you have already visited the site. Like I said, if you haven't, please share that with your neighbors. We plan to try and keep this meeting to about an hour because we respect your time and we know that some of you will need to peel off around that time. So once we get to that hour mark, we'll kind of do a check on time and try to stick to that. If we have questions that go past that time, we can arrange for those additional questions to be answered at a later date. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Gladys to give us a brief introduction as to where we are now. Gladys?
Hi, good evening, everyone. For those of you that are just logging on, my name is Gladys Gonzalez. I'm the Senior Management Analyst here with the City of Tulare under the Department of Economic Development. So I wanted to really quickly touch on previous efforts. So previously we had completed an engineer's report with the help of our consultant NBS. They really helped fine tune and define the PBID boundaries, estimated service costs that would maximize the impact in our downtown. And we did go out and do some public outreach. However, we heard concerns of the citizens, of the property owners, that we really needed to just kind of take a pause and then start from the beginning again and try to really refine this PBID to tailor it to what everyone wants, or at least get to the closest common consensus that we could. So just to reiterate, our current efforts, we're not in a petition phase. Right now, we're simply surveying everyone and trying to get every property owner's input on what they'd like to see and what they would like to really focus this PBID on. Once we reach a broad consensus, we'll hold a final public meeting and petition phase.
Great, thank you, Gladys. Now we have Michael Lemus, who will go over what a PBID can do. Michael?
Hello, thank you. Michael Lemus. I'm a downtown building owner off of Kern Avenue. I'm in support of this building for, yeah, or sorry, this PBID for a few reasons. One, I like the fact that it gives us control over the funds, which is, determined by the board. I mean, the building owners as a whole, but it's ran by the board. I look at it as like an HOA for downtown buildings, for us to be able to invest in our areas. We've seen similar PBIDs put in by Visalia over the last 10 plus years. And you see great improvements and investments in their downtown. I think we have a good opportunity to capitalize on what's going on downtown with the investment of the park and what, the things the cities have done for beautiful or storefront improvements, what have you. And I feel it's a good time to capitalize on that to keep momentum going. The things that I think that are very important, or I think we all do as building owners I've talked to, primarily seems like safety. We can hire additional security to help patrol the downtown. This could help mitigate some crime, and then before it happens. Not can't say it'll ever be eliminated, but it also could help with the management of homelessness as well. Because the police are busy, they need help. They don't have enough staff to do everything. So I look at this as a way to help supplement that. Beautification, we can get our planners updated and maintained and keep the eye appeal for downtown. Get a consistent sidewalk cleaning rather than having Stewart come once there's an accident that's found. We can keep a scheduled effort for this. This helping the ambiance, I think, will help bring more patrons down here to spend money. Lastly, would be, or not lastly, but another important point would be marketing / promotion. We could fund advertising through the theaters, and as well as doing a real social media presence. We're seeing that with some of the businesses downtown, like say Tap Yard or Drive Box. They're doing a big social media push. They hire out their social media and they're always doing something, and it's really helped their businesses. So along with that, looking to do maybe more events. The Downtown Association would have funds to help do more events, bring more folks down here, or whatever governing board is of these funds. I'm saying Downtown Association because that's how we do it today. But the more events we can do, the more folks we can get downtown. I feel the more repeat we can get going. So again, to summarize, I think the priorities are security, cleanliness, and marketing. All in all, that being said, I want to conclude with, with the owners I've talked to that are in support of this. We don't necessarily agree on what's most important or not, or how everything should be split up, but we do agree we're willing to compromise and find something that works for the majority. Thank you. And the next speaker is Sarah Meraz.
Hi there, Sarah Mears with NBS. I'll pause for just a second until the presentation is switched over. All right, so thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for me to see many of you again. We'll be talking about the Downtown Assessment District and kind of how the PBID works. One of the most important concepts in the PBID is that it is an assessment district, which follows very strict guidelines according to state law that we need to be aware of. So we'll go through that, as well as some of the methodology that we've used and the proposed formation schedule. Next slide. In terms of the background, a PBID is a very particular type of special assessment district that provides for the levy and collection of assessments on properties within a particular boundary. That revenue that's collected from benefiting properties pays the cost associated with the improvements, maintenance, and activities provided to the area. The law, if you're interested in looking at it, is the Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994, which is section 36600 of the California Streets and Highways Code. For those of you who are a little nerdy on the law like me and want to spend some time reading. One of the important features of an assessment of the PBID assessment district is that the owners association, and Michael spoke about this a little bit, the owners association actually administers the PBID under the law. So while the city is the party who submits the levy to the tax roll and does some very high level administration, the owners association is a private nonprofit entity that is under contract with the city to administer and implement the services and activities. And so it's a really important piece of the PBID to have that owners association, which is providing a lot of guidance to how the PBID operates. And that owners association is also responsible to prepare a report that is presented to council each fiscal year, which includes the recommended amount of assessments to be levied and collected for that year up to the maximum that's been established. Next slide. Michael also touched on this, so I won't spend too much time on it, but there are very specific activities and improvements that are authorized under PBID law. Things like promotion of events, furnishing of music, promotion of tourism, marketing and economic development, all of those are allowable activities under the PBID. The security, sanitation, graffiti removal, a lot of PBIDs that we see are providing what we would call clean and safe type activities or services. So that would be security and sanitation, maybe sidewalk, power washing, graffiti removal, that sort of thing. And they also can finance improvements. That's not something that has been contemplated here, but there are improvements that can be financed as well. Again, just wanting to make sure you all understand the very broad nature of the authorization of the PBID. But we're looking a little more narrowly here, at least to date, we've been looking at providing primarily those clean and safe type services. Next slide. This slide shows you the PBID formation process. When we started this process a while back, we went through data gathering, the special versus general benefit analysis, which is a requirement of the assessment district. We prepared a management district plan and an engineer's report, and we got to that petition phase. And that was where, as Gladys mentioned, we received some feedback from the community that caused us to pause and reinitiate in terms of some of the data gathering and communication with the community. So we are working through that again. And as decisions are made about the level of service and so forth, then we will update the special and general benefit analysis and the management district plan and engineers report so that then we can re-enter the petition phase with that new information. Once we finalize that petition phase and we have sufficient petitions signed by property owners, then we would move forward with the legislative process to form the PBID. That includes a stop at the City Council to adopt a resolution of intention. Following that meeting, the assessment ballots will be mailed out to each property owner, and those are mailed out at least 45 days ahead of the public hearing. And then that second stop at City Council would be the public hearing, as well as the ballot tabulation and resolution of formation, assuming that the PBID is approved. Next slide. So on that data gathering, we're doing things like looking at boundaries, trying to understand exactly what properties benefit from the services being provided. So we really need to gather information about the services, about the potential boundaries, what the budget is, and understand those property characteristics. All of that information will come together in the next portion of the project where we're doing some analysis. Next slide. That special versus general benefit analysis, again, is a requirement of Proposition 218, which governs the assessments in California. That was voted on by by voters in California. It was an initiative that was approved in 1996, and so it does govern. In the special and general benefit analysis is where we need to identify the benefits resulting from the services and proportionately allocate the special benefit amount to each parcel that is accessible, that receives those special benefits. And general benefits must be quantified and separated from the special benefit. So if we have a budget that is, our total budget makes up 100% of the cost, and we make a finding that, say, 5% of that is related to general benefit, only 95% of the budget will be collected from assessments, and other funds need to be found to pay for that additional 5%. We can only charge property owners for that special benefit. Next slide. On the formation process, after we have identified that general and special benefit, we prepare the documents that go along with it. That is the engineer's report and the management district plan. Those documents include items such as the boundary map of the district, the list of services and activities, the budget, the detailed method of assessment, such that any property owner can tell how their assessment is calculated, the proposed rules and regulations for the bid, and a listing of the proposed assessments by parcel. Next slide. In that petition phase, in order to progress to the city council and that first legislative action, we must receive petitions that are signed by property owners who will pay more than 50% of the total amount of the assessment. And again, that assessment is allocated to property based on benefits. So different property will pay a different amount. And we need to have petitions from property owners who will pay more than 50% of that total. The petition will include particular information about the total annual assessment. It'll include a map showing the boundaries of the district, and it'll include information specifying where the complete management district plan can be obtained. So just to make sure that all of the property owners who are completing the petition have all of the information in hand in order to make that decision as they are agreeing to help move the process forward. Next slide. At that first city council meeting, council will consider the petitions and the management district plan and engineer's report. And they will also consider the resolution of intention, which sets that public hearing date and orders the mailing of the assessment ballots. Next slide. Those ballots, as I mentioned, are mailed at least 45 days prior to the public hearing date. All of the property owners proposed to be assessed will be mailed an assessment ballot. Next slide. The first step at the public hearing or at that second city council meeting is to hold the public hearing, and their property owners will have the opportunity to hear and be heard. The next step is the ballot tabulation. Ballots are tabulated again, as with the petitions, they're tabulated based on that assessment amount, and they're weighted based on that assessment amount. So in terms of the tabulation, if we receive more than 50% of the proposed weighted assessments on ballots, if those are returned in favor, the city council may adopt a resolution of formation. If the converse is true, that more than 50% of the proposed weighted assessments on ballots returned are in opposition, then the city council would abandon proceedings. Next slide. This is the boundary that we had developed through the first portion of the process. It's not to say that this is the boundary that we will end up with, but we did just want to bring this information to you. You'll notice that there are a couple of zones here. You can see kind of the green and orange colors with that entire rectangular shape being included in the boundary. And the zones, Zone A and Zone B, represent areas where a different level of service would be provided. And again, this is the information from the last data gathering effort. This certainly may change as we continue gathering data, but wanted to provide some context here for you in terms of the areas that we're looking at. And one of the things that may change is that those zones may change. And I want to pause for just a moment to talk about those zones in terms of how they can be set. Those zones are related to the level of service received. That's a very important part of the assessment engineering process. So it may be, and just using, say, street sweeping as one of the examples, it may be that areas in orange, which are zone B, receive street sweeping every other month, but areas in zone A, which is green, might receive street sweeping twice a month, right? So it's that different level of service is what we're using to distinguish those zones. So really focusing in on how the services are different between the areas that we're serving. Maybe that the whole area has the same level of service at the end of the day. Those are determinations that we'll make. Next slide. Wanted to talk real briefly about that methodology because this is how the assessment engineering works. We are not in a situation where individuals will have input into their specific dollar amount that they pay. That's driven by the level of service, the services being performed, and the cost of service. And once we have that information, then we will identify parcels that benefit from the service and create that engineer's report, which separates general and special benefit. That report is signed and stamped by a registered professional engineer in California and has to meet a variety of requirements according to Proposition 218 in terms of proportionality of special benefit to parcels. So that engineering process will take all of the inputs about services, activities, costs, etc., and then generate the assessment amounts on a per parcel basis from there. Next slide. Based on the improvements in services that we were looking at, again, on the last version of this process, we were looking at safety and homeless mitigation as one of the special benefits, the marketing and economic development as one of the special benefits or one of the services, and cleaning and maintenance as one of the services. And each of those has different special benefits. One is improved aesthetics, two is increased safety, and three is increased economic activity. And based on that information, we're using different criteria to spread the assessment amount to each parcel. So in some cases, we're looking at the zone. In some cases, we're looking at land use. We're looking at lot size. We're looking at lot frontage. So we're really analyzing the property as well as the benefit provided by the services to determine that ultimate assessment for each parcel. Next slide. This is the process and the proposed timeline at this point. We are, again, kind of back in that data gathering phase to determine the services and finalize the boundary. And once we are done with that, we will move into our petition phase. We do have to have a final determination of those boundaries as we move into the petition phase because we have to have final assessment amounts at that point that will go on to the petition so that we can make a determination as to whether we have more than 50% of the total assessment amount represented as we gather those petitions. We're proposing the resolution of intention go to City Council on October 7th. That would have the assessment ballots mailed by October 17th, which is 45 days prior to the public hearing. And that public hearing would be held on December 2nd. So again, proposed timeline here just for your reference. Next slide. All right, and I think, John, I'm turning it over to you.
Go ahead. Okay.
So, John, do we have anybody sitting in the waiting room? I'm curious.
No.
No, we had a couple people join late, but everybody is in currently.
Okay, so this morning, these meetings always fascinate me, and I feel like a fool because this morning I told the committee before, as we prepared for this, to be prepared because over the last couple of days I've gotten some phone calls where my ear hurt when I got off the phone, and yet all the people that I know are busy are in this room. And then I reached out to one person this afternoon, And he said, well, if his workload would allow, he would be here. And sure enough, Tom Linder has joined us. And the Linders are one of the businesses. They were the first ones that Mark and I went and spoke to. And they endorsed the PBID and said that they would be more than happy to join and would support whatever efforts we had. So the other thing that I did today is I brought in 3 people. So Linda and Ron Wilborn, and I invited Ryan to come, but then I found out Mike had invited you as well. And the reason I invited them is because they're already members of a PBID, so they know how it works. They know what the PBID pays for. They know what the process is. They know how the decisions are made. And this way you have an opportunity to ask them questions. Anybody that showed up for this meeting could ask them questions about how this all operates. So in the case that we have right now, what we're paying for, just to give you an idea, the city is part of that PBID. So the city provides a cleaning crew 1 day a week on Mondays. So they come in, they clean the whole tower square. We wanted additional cleaning for the PBID. So what we did, we went, at that time, it was a city contractor. Now we still have the same contractor, but the city changed. So with our contractor, we drew up a contract that said, we want the trash enclosures cleaned because the city contractor wasn't doing that. So, our contract stipulated that all those trash enclosures had to be cleaned out and maintained as part of our Thursday maintenance. So that addressed that issue. Another one of the issues that we had, and what we decided when we sat down and figured this thing out, is we have ongoing maintenance issues, but we also have capital improvement projects that we'd like to see done. So one of the first capital improvement projects that we engaged in was we wanted more light in the tower square. So the city came to us as a member of the PBID and said, we'll pay for the installation of new lamp heads, we'll paint the poles, you guys buy the lamp heads. So the Tower Square PBID paid for those lamp heads, the city installed and painted the poles. And so that's how we did a joint project on that. Later, one of the things that we wanted to do, because we had a lot of people, and if any of you have been in Tower Square, you know what the layout is. There's a lot of nooks and crannies in there. We were having problems with people dragging in sofas and sitting them in front of the doorways of vacant buildings, drug use. We had a stabbing in there at one point. So there were all these negative things that were happening in Tower Square. So as the PBID, we approached the city, who had long said, you're not going to put any gates in there. And as the PBID, and with the city participating, we appealed to them to let us put gates in, and they did. So we were able to fence off certain areas of the Tower Square. Now, we had to leave the park open because that's a public park, but we were able to enclose some of the walkways and stuff where these people were hiding out. And so each 2 or 3 years, we've tackled a different capital improvement project. All those decisions are made by a board of property owners. So we call the property owners together. We have a board meeting. Most of the time, we have a board meeting every 90 days. I've been a little slow because I've been very busy, and we've been working on a project that's consuming a lot of time trying to get approvals and whatnot. But we meet once every 90 days. The board decides what we need to do, and then they determine what projects we're going to tackle. Now, for instance, downtown wide, maybe there's no capital improvement projects right now. Maybe the focus is all on just maintenance. That's what the board decides. So the board makes the decisions, and then we, as the manager of the Tower Square PBID, we implement whatever those decisions are. So if it's more cleaning, I contact the contractor and say, hey, we want to step up the cleaning. If it's a capital improvement project, I go to the appropriate departments, whatever it might be, and I set up whatever. I find out, first of all, what information we need in order to give the board members appropriate insights into what needs to happen or what they need to provide. And then from there, we approach all the agencies. I approach all the agencies that we need to talk to, and make plans to implement whatever that capital improvement project is. So that's how it works. It's very property owner centric. And I think that's one of the things, at least from the phone calls I've gotten the last couple of days, that I think people are kind of missing the point on, is that it's very property owner centric. Property owners make the decisions. Property owners are anteing up the money. Property owners are making the decisions. And I think that's the crucial thing. And from my experience, I've attended a lot of conferences over the years. specifically about downtowns. And over the years, what I've found without exception is those communities that have utilized PBIDs have a very high success rate as far as attracting more businesses to their downtown, elevating their property values, and drawing more business to the business to their business tenants. So I think a PBID can be a good way to go. That being said, property owners have to decide that it's a good way to go. So I feel like the Downtown Association, we've done everything that we could possibly do to keep tenants in buildings down here. When I saw that we were using downtown assessment money to go outside the downtown and produce events, I personally felt that wasn't where our money should be going. And so I actually set up a 501c3 charity for us so that we could bring money from outside the downtown into the downtown. So we have other entities within the community that are supporting the downtown. But as with anything, we need additional revenue streams. And so this is an option that's available to us. And so we've pursued this to see, is this something that property owners would be interested in assisting in? And the choice goes to the property owners. You can say, yes, we want to. No, we don't want to. Yes, we want to, but these are the parameters we're seeking, or this is the amount of money we want to contribute. That's all up to the property owners. It's all your decision to make. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, John, for sharing that. That's really great. With that, we'd like to move into questions. So how we'll go about doing that is we'll go ahead and we'll call on you. We'll go ahead and do the folks online first, and then we'll move to the group that is meeting there at the city. And I ask you to stick to one question at a time, just because we want to get through everyone's questions. We want to give everyone an opportunity to ask their individual question, and also no grandstanding. We understand that, you may have a lot of opinions about this process, but let's keep that to a minimum and try and focus on just getting information out to everyone, as well as I'm sure all of you know, no name calling or foul language, stuff like that will ask you to be removed from the meeting. So if you have a question, you can, I saw Mark, you were there, and then Katie, you raised your hand online. So you can raise your hand there. I'll go in that order. If you can just say your name, if you're a property owner, and then if you'd like to share where your property is, please do so. You're not required to do that, but just to kind of help the group to know who's talking and, who's all involved at this point and what you're looking to do. So Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Katie, or Danielle, rather. This is Mark Mondell, the City of Tulare City Manager. I just want to provide some additional comments that I think are very important, because I think there's some misunderstandings out there. The first one is I want everyone to understand, and those that have been participating for a while already know this, but the city has been sort of heavily involved in the process, and to a certain extent driving it to this point, because we believe it's the right thing to do for downtown, not because the city's going to make any money off of this. This is the city spending its taxpayer funds to fund the consultant effort, but we're not going to receive a dime from this project if it were to move forward. That money is going to be controlled, as already stated, by the Downtown Association or whatever nonprofit group is going to be responsible for managing this. And the reason we believe that is because, as you know, we collect property tax revenue throughout the whole city. And we take that property tax revenue, we have to provide a base level of service across the city. We can't take the tax revenue from everywhere else in the city and spend it all downtown. We have to provide a base level of service across the city. And that's what we're doing now in the downtown. So for those people who say, well, the city should be handling all the maintenance downtown and all the marketing, all stuff, we can't. We don't have the funds to do that. That's why when you see certain areas of the city that have a higher level of maintenance, it's because they've annexed into a special taxing district. It may not be a PBID, it might be a lighting and landscape district, but it's like an HOA. They pay the base property tax plus additional tax to have a higher level of maintenance. This would be the same thing. The only difference is it may not be the city using those additional dollars to maintain downtown. It would be whoever the board decides to contract to do that work. The second thing I want to be able to share with you guys is the city supports this and would be the largest contributor to this district. The city is the largest landowner in the downtown. We're not exempt from paying this additional assessment. In fact, the city would be paying the largest assessment. So all the people on this board would take the tax dollars that the cities use, that the city collects and pays this assessment with, and then you would use that assessment to do the things downtown that you want to do. The city also supports this because we've invested about $25 million already in the downtown recently. I have a whole list of projects, and we continue to invest in the downtown. We're doing all kinds of different work behind the scenes to improve downtown, which will improve your property values, add more patrons to come to your businesses. But we believe this is a critical step to try to raise the level of service downtown that we cannot do. And then I have a couple other comments, but I won't get into those unless there's questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Katie, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Darren Rowley. We've spoken, most of us in this room have spoken with me. I am concerned. I am concerned with neutrality. All I have seen so far in this entire meeting is grandstanding and an absolute pro contribution and nothing from the opposition. In fact, the meeting started with people being allowed to speak and discuss the reason why they believe this should be done. Multiple people have. But no time was given to anyone that's in opposition to the PBID. My biggest concern is the actual Prop 218 adherence. You may go forward with your Prop 218 proposals and PBID ideas, but they must be fashioned and they must comply with state law and state organized Proposition 218 concepts. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that at all. Instead, I'm seeing a group of people who have made a decision, not even allowing those like myself that are property owners to know what is happening. I have documents now in my possession from the city of Tulare showing the city of Tulare was aware that my APNs would be added to this organization in October of 2024. I was notified by this organization last Tuesday that this might be going forward with my property in the form of a survey that was, again, pro and non-neutral. So I'd like to know from this organization where the neutrality is in this process. This concerns me. We have properties that you have roped into this that are residential properties that house at-risk families. These at-risk families cannot burden the additional costs that you're imposing upon them. And one specific comment, Mark, the monies the city is going to be adjusting to this program are monies taken from taxation from the people. So the very money you're talking about is coming from us twice. I was also told by Jennifer with your department that the city of Tulare does not have a stake in this, yet you have an 8% stake. You're the largest contributor to this. You're the largest voting section to this. The city must take a stance of neutrality. That is required. So I am very concerned about what's here. And there are a lot of people on this list of people that you see in front of you that have questions that are from the group that I'm beginning to put together. We demand from this organization, from the city, from you, Mark, specifically, that we be given the right to come forward and present our case, not grandstanding, not just only presenting one side, but bringing forward our concerns to the city and the citizens of the city that are represented by the council members, by the mayor, by the vice mayor. These people have the right to discuss this as well. And I am not happy with the comment of you're not allowed to grandstand when I've just seen that. I have spent the last 8 days discussing this with almost everybody that I see in this room. And everyone has told me all kinds of different things, including the city themselves telling me there is absolutely no way this can even move forward this year, not to worry, yet you just presented to me and on this recording, which had better be preserved, I'm requesting its preservation now, formally from you, Mark. I am telling you that you presented to me that this will be all wrapped up before the end of 25. There has been so much disingenuous information that has been passed to me that I can't even begin to express the level of disinformation I am seeing. And in fact, the very meeting tonight, I had to demand from your offices, Mark, that I be added to the list because for 8 days we've been waiting for this invitation. And I finally got it a few hours ago from various different people when I said, look, we expect to be allowed to be there. And then I was simply told we might have to just come in person, changing the entire organization of what you guys have presented to me as well. And I expressed, there's no way I can bring these people. Many of these people aren't even available at that time, but we are available via this process. So I'm very disturbed with what's happening. There needs to be transparency. There needs to be neutrality. And Mark, I'm talking specifically to you. You
Darren,
left me a
thank you.
message, and you and I can talk tomorrow, like you said. You never called me back. I left messages with your office. I was never responded to until midday today by text, and you told me I'll talk to you tomorrow, and that's fine. We will talk tomorrow. But I am concerned. Again, my questions are neutrality, and this needs to be a plan of fairness, and it needs to be transparent. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren, for your comments. I do want to note that at the beginning of the meeting, we said that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on civicmic.com/Tulare. I also, if I know you said you have questions about the 218 process. We have Sarah Maris here from NBS who deals with the 218 process with hundreds of agencies over the last almost 3 decades and can answer if you have very specific questions about that. And then, so if you do have a very specific question about that, we'll go to other questions and give everyone else an opportunity to ask questions and be heard tonight. But if you have some specific questions, write those down and then we can come back to you and get those answered, or you can email me directly, or when you talk with Mark, ask for those directly as well. My email is dwood for Danielle Wood, DWOOD @civicmic.com. So feel free to email me any questions you have and we'll get those answered and posted on civicmic.com/Tulare if we don't already have the answers to those questions there. But a question about the Zoom link, if I think that maybe you mentioned something there, I just want to say that we do wait to give that out until very near the beginning of the meeting. We let everyone know it'll be available and then we send that out at the beginning of the meeting to anyone who's registered for the meeting because we are trying to protect those individuals who are in the meeting from being exposed to outside parties who try to kind of take over the meeting and aren't really part of this downtown process. So all of those, and but like I said, if you have specific questions about the 218 process, go ahead and write those down and we can come back to you. So were there any other questions for anyone else online? Okay, I saw a hand go up. I see it says guest. Go ahead and unmute yourself and say your name, please.
Yes, good evening. This is Tucker. We work with many different homeless advocacy groups in Tulare, including CSET, Veterans Administration, who are all trying to place at-risk or homeless individuals. And I know PBID specifically have come under fire and legal problems regarding violation of 4th and 14th Amendment rights with hiring extra security. A few moments ago, one of your members said the property owners pay and the property owners decide. If there is a legal dispute that comes pending, do property owners then pay for the defense of any pending legal action? Thank you.
Sarah?
Yeah, property owners can only pay their maximum assessment. So the assessment can never go beyond the maximum that is approved based on the ballot proceeding and that is delineated in the engineer's report and the management district plan. So, just setting that foundation that that amount can never be exceeded in any given year. To the extent there is a challenge to the PBID itself, that would have to be that's a question that would have to be answered by an attorney in terms of how that might be handled. And I mean, there's lots of options when something is challenged. You can choose to defend it or not. And so again, just really need to leave that question to an attorney in terms of any potential legal action. That's certainly not something that as the assessment engineering firm, we can address.
As the city manager, I'll also respond to that. So we wouldn't envision as the city somehow conveying the police powers over to any other group, right? So the powers the city has to detain individuals, to arrest individuals, so on and so forth. Those same powers exist throughout the entire city. So we wouldn't anticipate rendering or portraying to this downtown entity any special police authority or powers. So if there was something involved with detaining a homeless individual or somehow a violation of their civil rights, while I expect there to be a lawsuit, and typically with lawsuits, people like to sue everyone because they typically like to try to get some form of settlement with everyone and anyone they can. I would imagine that those types of lawsuits would largely be with the city.
Thank you for answering that, Mark and Sarah. We'll move on to Michelle Reynolds. You can take yourself off mute.
Hi, good evening. Yes, my name is Michelle Reynolds, and my husband and I own a property on K Street near Cross over in that vicinity. I do have a couple of questions. I was not at the first meeting, but I did listen to the recording. And one of the questions that I had and thought would be beneficial would be to kind of understand where the current baseline of services are. I know that there was some information put in that last presentation of what the cadence of services could be, and that was something that was being discussed. But I think kind of understanding where we're coming from a baseline perspective to kind of understand, so I don't know if any of these things are happening in any sort of regularity or if it's, on request or on demand only. So that would be something that I think would be helpful for a future presentation. A second thing I think for me is the enforceability of homeless mitigation. So obviously it's something that we have struggled with at our particular property. And so, I mean, I understand that, there would be increased patrols and things, but I don't really see that there's an enforceability or teeth here that's going to really assist with that. So I think for me, what I see is there's a lot of fluff and PR language and things like that in these like hypothetical 30,000 feet macro views. But I would like to kind of see like, okay, well, explain to me, how is that going to work? And how does that partnership with the police department work? Or, because to me, it doesn't seem to make sense to put in all these additional funds if it's not really going to get us the result that's desired. I know you indicated that Tower Square has one of these. I'm sure that particular area has had its own challenges, but personally, as a downtown business owner, like when I look at what I perceive to be within that district, I don't see what I would want for my property. So I guess for me, just at a high level, looking at that property, I'm like, is a PBID successful there? Again, I don't know all the individual things. I'm sure that there's been a lot of really positive things that have come out of that because I'm not an individual owner there. But that is something that, I just have concerns about, because I can just tell you, if these property owners are going to be putting in thousands of dollars a year, there's going to be a high expectation of what are we going to be getting for that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Michelle, if you don't mind, if I can ask you a quick question, and you don't have to tell me specifically, but if you've seen the study, it sounds like you have looked at all the documents. There's a couple of different areas proposed, sort of the core area in the downtown and a certain level of service associated with that, and areas that are sort of not in the core area of downtown. Are you in the core or outside of the core?
My property is currently in zone B, so it would be not, however, the activity at my property, we have a lot because we're near the transit station.
Okay,
And, yeah.
thank you.
And Michelle, we'll go ahead and work together with this team. I don't know if there's anything else, Mark, you want to add in regards to her questions about the enforcement, or that's something that, we can definitely work on gathering more information and sharing with you directly and through civicmic.com.
Yeah, I will just add on the homeless issue, the big picture citywide. So, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we built an encampment as a temporary measure to move homeless off the railroad tracks because about 14 of them had laid down and committed suicide. And it was also a means to sort of consolidate in one area and clean up other areas. And that worked, not perfectly, but it worked, right? We're now building the homeless shelter. And once the shelter's finished, which is scheduled to be finished in January of next year, we will be very active. We sort of have this balanced approach between being very humane and offering services. We've already placed about 140 homeless individuals into permanent supportive housing, so we've had a lot of success there. Of course, we can't control the influx of people, but our homeless shelter and the Tulare encampment are Tulare first only. So you have to have a tie to Tulare in order to stay there. And once the shelter is done, that will support on day one about 180 individuals. It can grow up to about 400, but we don't anticipate it growing up. We're going to keep a lot of capacity for Tulare residents in case we have a big recession again and they go homeless. So we need to have some capacity there. But once that facility is finished, we will be picking up on our enforcement side of the equation more, right? So if you're Tulare based, then you need to stay at the shelter, or you need to work with us to be placed in permanent supportive housing or in some other place. You can't continue to encamp in our parks and on our streets. And if you're not from Tulare, then you need to work with us to figure out where's the right place for you to be. But it's not on our streets and it's not in our shelter. It's not our job to solve every community's homeless issue. And so you will see when the shelter's done, and another level of increased reduction in encampments and impacts from homelessness, sort of along the same level that you did once we got the encampment going and got the railroad tracks cleaned up. But there's a lot more to this, and I think we just need to do a better job of helping you understand that per your question.
Right. Thank you, Mark. And we'll be sharing after we wrap up the questions here, we'll share with you future opportunities to have one-on-one discussions, in-person meetings before we move into the petition phase. So to gather more information from all of you and your neighbors to make sure that this is the district that you want to potentially see succeed. So we'll go ahead and move to Jacqueline, and then after that, we'll go to the group there at the city. Jacqueline, you can go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have a little bit of background before I ask my question, just to make sure that everybody's understands where I'm coming from here. So my property would be in the B district, so it's residential and it's a one home property. So you were mentioning earlier about the assessments needing to be based on a proportional special benefit for each property. I'm not understanding how this really applies to the residential property owners. It seems to me that the services being funded, things like marketing, business recruitment, and economic development, don't really benefit us. And the engineer's report confirms that residential parcels actually receive zero economic benefits whatsoever. And while it assigns us some value for like aesthetic and safety, those claims seem very subjective, vague, or even inflated. There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence backing up why those points were applied to the residential zones. And I don't understand necessarily the want or need for private security in those areas. Maybe it's me in my area, but I don't see a significant amount of issues outside of what the city generally provides to us. So it seems to me that these services are really tailored for commercial and commercial storefronts. So I'd like to ask for some clarification on why residential is being included. How is it really helping residential? It seems to me like it's just a way to expand the the whole PBID so that more money can be assessed, and then saying that, there'll be some like general benefits, that are going to be given to the residential just because, they're near the downtown commercial. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Sarah, let me answer it first and then you can get more technical on it. So at a very high level, when we do planning for the downtown area, we try to plan it on the same general district boundaries at the macro level, which is when you look at the map that's in the study, and I may not get this exactly right, but it's essentially, I remember Inyo in the south, um, um, what's the North Street? Cross, I think, is it Cross? Yeah, to the north, J to the west, and I think I don't have it in front of me now. I think it's N or O on the east. And that's the boundary that we're using for pretty much all of our planning efforts. If you look at the downtown master plan, which is a different document, you'll see in that plan that same boundary at the macro level, not the micro level. And when we're thinking of the downtown, we're not thinking about it, what does it look like and just function like today? We're thinking about it in terms of where is it headed in the future, right? Because as we continue to work to make downtown, very similar to what you see in other communities that have successful downtowns, they transform over time, right? And so you'll see, for example, sometimes residential areas, and you see a little bit of this already in our downtown. Some residential areas start becoming slightly more commercial in their nature. Now, I'm not saying it has to go that way. I'm saying that's often what happens. So you might see a residential area that all of a sudden has a home occupancy. Somebody chooses to live there versus, let's say, in Del Lago or some other known subdivision in Tulare because they want to have a home business there. They're an accountant and they also live in their home. Or you start seeing, the orange or red boundary, that larger macro area is the boundary I'm talking about right now. And so, or you start seeing some of those areas over time start transforming and they move out of residential use and they become more commercial or office type uses. So, right now, for example, we've got a couple streets that have actually done that. If you drive down them, you see like there are restaurants and a beauty salon I'm not saying the city's saying it has to all be that way. It's just normally what happens over time as you start bringing more investment into a downtown area, you get greater densification of uses and you start getting more mixed uses in the area. And so we're thinking about it from that perspective. And then to your specific point, I think the other piece that the city has looked at, again, we're not necessarily driving the process. We hired the consultant to do it, but you guys are ultimately driving the process. So this is subject to change. Even the boundaries are subject to change, okay? But we also think about it from a maintenance perspective, right? So I wouldn't disagree with you that some of those services that are listed there would be greater in benefit to, let's say, a commercial area than a residential area. Ideally, maintenance, whatever the form of that maintenance is, would be a benefit to everyone to have enhanced maintenance. And that would be my comment. And then Sarah, I know you probably have other comments.
Yeah, Mark, and that's exactly right. That, as it relates to some of those activities that are meant to drive business downtown that have that economic benefit, that isn't a benefit to the residential property. So you're exactly right about that. But things like safety, whether, those types of programs, any of the cleaning types of programs, that is definitely service that is above and beyond what would occur in other residential areas of the city. And so we cannot, by virtue of Proposition 218, exclude any property from the assessment that benefits from those services. And so if you're having, power washing of the sidewalk in front of your residential property, that is a benefit to your property. And we must, according to California's Constitution, where Prop 218 is housed, we must allocate the assessment accordingly. But that's why we separate out those benefits so that we can recognize for residential property that those economic components to the services do not provide the same level of benefit to residential property as they do to commercial type property.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
This is Katie here. I have a quick question bouncing off the residential properties. So it's it's my understanding from what you're saying that we're being roped into this in our low income housing for at-risk individuals because you're assuming that one day we are going to be pushed out by big business and forced into the commercial district.
No, no one said that.
Not at all.
So then can I understand why we are being told that we have to be a part of the district? Because I am more than happy to go out and wash down the sidewalk for my tenants so that they don't have to pay an additional fee when they're already struggling to make their rent every month.
Yeah, so again, I don't know all the things you've heard or have said, people have said to you, but again, we've already presented to you, like the consultant presented, this is sort of the start of the process again, right? So even the study was done originally, and we were going through that process. They pushed a pause on it and they said, let's start again and let's start over. So we have a document still and we have a district boundary. At the end of the day, those things can change. The type of services, the level of services, the district boundaries, those things can all change. And, I'm sure everybody that's on this phone call, those who support the district and those who do not, and we welcome and enjoy everybody's opinions. That's why we're doing these things. Nobody's cramming anything down anyone's throat. I'm sorry if you feel that way. It just happens to be, we had a document done, so it's already developed. So we're working from that document. So if at the end of the day, people say, I don't really want to be in a district, we'll look at that. The challenge is going to be, it's kind of like a democracy in a way, right? It's not exactly that, but you and I might not agree on who should be the next governor of California, but there's a big election and the majority of those votes win the election, right? And so I can't say I don't like Governor A, so therefore they're not my governor. It's like whatever the majority votes for is who the governor is going to be. And it's sort of the same way at the end of the day, whatever the district boundaries are formed, the majority of those votes of those properties that are in that district are going to be and I think, Sarah could talk a little bit more about that, about how it's weighted and how the votes work. We're not at that stage yet, but to answer your question, we could talk about that a little bit, if that helps you.
Yeah, and to add to Mark's comment, Katie, I would encourage you to stay involved. Come to the next in-person meeting, take the survey if you haven't. Send us an email about, your specific area, the solution that you see as far as where the boundaries could move because of potential benefits for removing an area or adding an area, if anyone wants to add an area or remove another area. But that's what this process is, right? We want to hear from everyone. We want to hear why you think it's a good reason to include this area or to remove this area. So, thank you for being here and asking your questions and getting a little more insight on what the process looks like. But the boundaries aren't determined at this point. So we look forward to hearing more from you and finding out what the solution is that you recommend, that you see from your angle. So thank you for that. Jacqueline, I see your hands up, but we're going to go ahead and move to the community room there since we've already had a question from you, and then we'll go back to you after that. So Gladys, you can go ahead and unmute there and see if you have anyone in the room that has a question.
My question is about the cost basically for the property owners. So it says on the website how they will be calculated, but it doesn't really give you the calculation to know, are you paying $3,000 a year? Are you paying $300 a year? So from our perspective as a property owner, we want to know our cost before we would make a decision. So how do we determine our cost?
We do have that readily available, but like we said, that was those figures are based off of the first round. So now that we're kind of reinitiating it, we need to come to a common consensus. And Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong on the amount of services, and then we can put a value on that, and that's how we divvy it up, and then we can formally give you
so
individual.
We can't get the numbers from the old report just to kind of have a general idea.
I'm happy to share that with you individually. Yeah, just shoot me an email with your APN and I can let you know what it was previously based on.
Okay.
I personally found that really helpful because we have property in both Zone A and Zone B. So we have a commercial property downtown, and then we have a residential property kind of off of Tulare Avenue and O Street.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the price differentiation based on commercial versus residential kind of opened my eyes of, this is more to support property values and kind of have a cohesive level of what we're getting from downtown versus the major bill we were going to see as a downtown commercial space. So I thought that that table was actually really helpful and something that probably should be shared a little bit more. Because again, I was pretty in opposition when I first heard about it, but seeing that differentiation in it kind of made me realize like, oh, like what I'm paying for one property versus the other was substantially different.
Now, Sarah, at one time, I could be wrong, but I thought we had an interactive on the website, a map where you could kind of get some of that information. Was I wrong about that? We did
No,
not
that's
have.
where I found it. It was on the CivicMic website.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, I
Yep,
was on
absolutely.
the website. It just gives you, it doesn't give you like a price. It just tells you things like your linear shape and your APN and stuff. It doesn't tell
The
you
last time it had like a
cost.
price, it said like this would be how much you would be assessed.
It doesn't say that now.
Yeah, we want to make sure you can get that. That's very important to us too, that you know, because again, it's a lot of opposition doesn't know if we're talking about an ant or an elephant, right? And so for some people, they might look at it and go, "Oh, I thought they were going to talk about $3,000 a year. They're only talking about 300. Oh, okay, I'm not as worried now, right?" So I think it's very important that people know what we're talking about. We're happy to share that.
Yeah, and that will definitely, at one point it was on there as far as on the map that you could see it, but because we're restarting a lot of this process, right? We're looking at the services, the service levels, the boundaries, all those numbers can completely change. So once we discuss what those boundaries look like, what the services are that people are looking for and interested in having, and then we rerun the numbers, that will definitely be available. It'll be available on civicmic.com. It will be available on your petition. It will be available if we make it past the petition phase, right? So there's multiple phases to this process. And if we make it past the petition phase, then it will also be on your ballot. So it won't be a number that you'll have to guess. That will be readily available to you. So thank you. That was a great question. Any other questions there in the room?
I guess I have one more, but should we do the other people? No,
We have one more question from, I'm sorry, what was?
Amanda.
From Amanda.
Go ahead.
My question is about boundaries. So I see that they've exempted the city from zone A, which I would assume would be the highest cost zone. Is there a reason why the city was taken out?
Well, the boundaries, just so you know, were not designed based on, oh, let's exempt somebody or let's make sure somebody's included in it. They weren't designed really from a financial perspective. They were designed more from how do I want to describe it? Kind of like an urban perspective, like what areas are more cohesive? Like think about land use and zoning, like where's more residential areas, where's more commercial areas. And so, for example, like Zumwalt Park, that big, if you look at the map, that big solid green area right there in the kind of like in the bottom right-hand corner, sort of, that's city. And that's 100% in the zone A boundary. So the city would be paying, top fare, so to speak, on that boundary. The city hall piece down below it is not in that area. Those are more institutional use, like the city hall building itself, right? But that big park space is. But again, we can play around with boundaries. These are not set in stone. We're happy to whatever ultimately we think makes sense. We're happy to work on that.
And also just reiterating that the city parcels that are included are being assessed. So there are several city parcels within the map that you see, and they are being assessed based on the benefit they receive. Public property, but again, by virtue of Proposition 218 in the California Constitution, public property is not exempt from being assessed.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Jacqueline, did you still have a question? If you did, you can go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Yeah, I do. Again, just another clarification item. I'm looking at how the fees, and I think this is kind of similar to questions in the room about how fees are being assessed. But I noticed I think it was in the FAQs and in the engineer's report, that the way that fees go up over time is based off of the CPI for Los Angeles. is there a reason that we're using Los Angeles's CPI and not Tulare's? Like their city is more than 100 times the size of Tulare's, and it almost guarantees then that we're going to go up every year in costs. And I understand, inflation is a thing that happens, and you have to keep up with costs going forward. But why aren't we keeping it at the same level as Tulare? Why are we using Los Angeles? I don't understand.
There isn't a published CPI for Tulare specifically, so we do have to look at the available published indexes that are put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's why we're tying to a particular index. I didn't recall that we were using Los Angeles actually, but and that is certainly something that's open for discussion. But we can't use Tulare because Tulare does not have its own specific CPI index that is something that is published.
Yeah, when you look at CPI indexes, they're typically much larger metropolitan areas. I don't remember in California how many there are, but I know, like, for example, when we look at other things like paying per diem rates for employees traveling, right? I would love to be able to pull the Central Valley per diem rate, but it doesn't exist. I have to use San Francisco's if I remember, or Los Angeles's. I have to pick one of those two if I remember. So yeah, we're happy if you guys can find decent published sources or have other recommendations. We're happy to look at that as well.
So in that case, I did notice that the engineer's report, at least the one online, is still a draft. So is it open to adjustments then if we can find other sources? Because I know at least in residential, it seems that there are sources that could be used at maybe not directly a CPI, but it shows, the inflationary rate. So maybe there could be a different rate for zone A and zone B, since zone B seems to be mostly residential, or as you were saying, it's kind of based on the planning zones, and so they are different zones. But is that something that could potentially happen?
I think we could look at it. I would want to know what it is, what are the sources, you know what I mean? Like, we typically try to stick with published, recognized governmental type sources versus, like if there was a private sector group, let's say a magazine came out with their own CPI and next year the magazine's gone, right? I mean, so we'd have to look at what the sources are, but yeah, we're open to talking about all those things. And we just got to make sure at the end of the day, it's agreeable and that it's supported by statute, that we're not violating statute.
And I also wanted to share that I just looked and we did use the Los Angeles CPI in the draft engineer's report, and we also capped that at 3%. So we were, really mindful of of course, the recent CPI. There was a year that it was 7% roughly. We were very mindful that while cost did increase that much according to the Consumer Price Index, that was not something that would be really tenable for property owners. And so while, we're looking at CPI, we did cap that at 3% to mitigate some of the larger swings that we might see in the Consumer Price Index. So just wanted to mention that as well, that it wasn't just open to anything, to CPI as a whole, that we put that cap in there.
Yeah, and just so you guys know too, I mean, this doesn't necessarily matter, but we do labor negotiations all the time with employees, right? And so they're always looking for negotiations, the CPI adjustment to their salaries. And, we went back and studied the last 25 years of CPI, and it, like Sarah was saying, man, it could go all over the place. But on average, it's typically in the 2.5% to 3% range over that time period. But we're happy to talk about all that stuff. That everything's on the table for discussion.
Yeah, great questions. And, we really appreciate everyone coming tonight and asking these questions and getting involved. We love to hear the different perspectives. And since we are at just over an hour and 15 minutes here, unless we have any last question, we'll go ahead and move on to the next steps to let you know how you can stay involved and, what's coming up next. If you have any recommendations for ways that you think things can change or get updated, we welcome that. We'd love for you to reach out to us. Gladys, did you want to go over the slide here of just what's next for everyone?
Yeah, I believe Jennifer has some talking points.
Oh, Jennifer. Okay.
Thank you. Jennifer Gomez. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Development and Redevelopment with the city. And so just to kind of recap, some of the notes that I was taking that from the questions and comments that have been brought up so far, it seems like the main service that everyone's mostly concerned with is the security and how that's going to play out to be able to address some of the homeless issues and be able to meet the expectations with any assessments that are done that these things can actually be accomplished. The concerns about what kind of benefits the residential owners would get compared to the commercial properties. That there were general questions about the assessments and how those are going to be determined, and that everyone wants to make sure that what their individual assessment is going to be, that we make sure that that becomes available to you in a timely manner so that you could take that into consideration going into the petition phase. And so those are like the main takeaways that I got from everybody. And so as far as what comes next, we were planning to have a second public meeting in August. And so everyone certainly invited to that. The information will be on CivicMic's website. But if you provide us your email contact information, we'll be sure to email you that information as well. And so at that meeting, that's where we want to kind of dive a little bit more detail on the costs of these different service levels. That so hopefully we can kind of get a better consensus as to where people are wanting to spend money. Because we've also been collecting quotes on different types of services. You know, if someone's, go back to the pressure washing, getting quotes of like, if you're wanting the pressure washing once a week or once a month, we're getting those ideas because that would certainly play into your overall assessment. So you can let us know, nope, I don't need a pressure wash, daily. I can, do it less often. So those are things that we can hopefully dive into in that August meeting and address any further concerns that everyone has, including the potential boundaries, and be able to reevaluate those things and then make those final adjustments based on that meeting. After that, we'll be able to have our consultant kind of finalize information and again, get that proposed assessment amounts to everyone. And then we'll be able to get the petitions mailed out to all of the property owners where we do need that 50% plus one in support of the PBID to be able to proceed with all of the other steps in the process that they went over at the beginning of today's meeting. There are multiple ways for you all and other property owners to stay in contact with us. I provided my contact information up there. If you are wanting to receive things by email me, let me know, and we'll add you into like an email group. Of course, John, he's had his past experience with PBIDs, and a lot of you probably are already know John quite well and with his involvement with the downtown. So certainly feel free to bug him and he'd be able to answer any questions that you might have. But of course, our consultants will be continuing to update the website with like today's recorded meeting. That'll be on there. I assume like the PowerPoint presentations would be available as well, I'm assuming. So as things keep getting updated, you'll be able to find information there. And of course, another way to stay connected is just continue to reach out to other property owners. Share the information that you've gained, the knowledge you've gained. If people are asking you questions, direct them to us and we'll do our best to answer their questions as well.
Hi,
Yeah.
I may. Just wanted a couple of comments. Lino Pimentel, I'm also a property owner, multiple properties downtown. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate the fact that we should really stay open-minded to this process. for the simple reason that we have properties to protect. We have an interest which is futuristic. Anytime you own a property, it's an investment. It's a future benefit to you, your family, your legacy, what have you. We need to really analyze and piggyback on what's going on right now. We are in a position downtown Tulare where we have an opportunity to take advantage of the timing and what's going on. So I think that we owe it to ourselves to be positive and listen to what's going on. I've been around here for quite a few years. I'm in a real estate business, and values downtown, as most of you would agree, have increased. Why have they increased? They've increased because there's actually things being done. There's actually things happening. So I think that you should all stay open-minded to that fact. The city has spent, like Mark said, over $25 million in downtown, and they're continuing to spend. They're not done with the projects. They're still working on projects. There's future thinking going on. All of that is going to increase traffic to downtown. All of that is going to bring people from outside of Tulare. It already has with the theater. So I see a lot of positive going forward, and I think we all owe it to ourselves to stay positive. I'm the president of the Tulare Downtown Association, have been for the last couple of years. We've done a lot of work towards that same process, okay? Encouraging downtown development. The city is cooperating, which in the past didn't cooperate so well. So that is a plus. Let's take advantage of that, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and we appreciate that. And again, thank you all for joining us. If you haven't taken the survey already, please do so. It's on civicmic.com/Tulare. You can find it there. Provide us with any information or feedback that you have. Sign up for updates, as Jennifer mentioned, as well. You can sign up on civicmic.com there. Anytime we're sending out a meeting, updates to questions, it will be there. And then here's the contact information for my team and my email specifically if you have questions and you'd like to reach out to our team. So again, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great meeting. Hopefully a lot of your questions were answered, and we appreciate all of you, and we look forward to seeing all of you at the in-person meeting. We'll be sending out more information about that in the next couple of weeks.